Hi, it's Maya here, and I'm trying to catch up with my reads and receipts, so here are my April reads and receipts. I also hosted the Women Write Classic Science Fiction and Fantasy Readathon in April, so this is also my wrap up for that. I had wanted to post more videos during that month, but in April my computer broke and I had webcam problems, so here we go, finally, my wrap up for the Classic SFF Readathon. So if you don't know what my reads and receipts videos are, in these videos I go through what I read, my TBR count, and how I did with my challenges. And I can say that, like in March and April, I didn't do that well in any of my challenges, and it wasn't really my focus for those months. So my TBR count at the start of April was 69 books, and let's start with the reads. I read 3 books for my readathon, and I had the challenge of Through the Ages, so I read 3 books from 3 different consecutive decades. And the first book I read was Dragon's Bane by Barbara Hambly for the 80s. And this was an owned ebook, it's high fantasy, and it tells about this pair of aging adventurers and this young nobleman who have to travel to the capital to help them with this dragon who is plaguing the nearby area, but when they arrive they also find unforeseen political and magical power struggles. So there's this young idealistic clumsy nobleman who appears to the north into this village to find the legendary Dragon's Bane that he has heard so much about and is really into, and is trying to, of course, find this person who has previously killed the dragon to come to the capital and help the king with the dragon problem there. But he is quite disappointed to find the local Dragon's Bane, who is John Aversin, who is the leader of this small village. And he's much more interested in studying his books about like pig farming and engineering than being this legendary hero figure for him. He doesn't really have an incentive to travel to the south to help a king who doesn't really care about his neck of the woods. Also, he did kill a dragon once, but it was very reluctantly because it was destroying his lands, and he had the help of a witch. And this witch is our main character. She's called Jenny Waynest, and she has great ambitions but not so great magical powers. John is her lover and they have kids together, and the kids live with John, but Jenny is forever plagued with these doubts of whether she would be a more powerful witch if she had just focused on her studies and spent more time alone studying and not spent time with these human concerns like falling in love and having kids. And this hunger for magic is a big theme in the story, and it's a theme that I really enjoy, so that was maybe my favorite thing in the book. I also liked that the dragon turned out to be an actual character, so rather than just being a creature to be killed, it had an actual role to play, and what the titular Dragon's Bane was turned out to be very clever. As to what I didn't really care about the book, I wasn't a big fan of the main antagonist, and the final fight was also a bit of a letdown, even though the actual ending after that final fight was great. Also, when the main trio was traveling to the capital, there were some random encounters on the way that I wasn't that into. Then there's one random thing that I thought I'd mention, which is that there's a spoiler in the Goodreads and Amazon description for this book, at least for the edition that I was looking at. There's something mentioned like right at the beginning of that description that is revealed like a fifth of the way through the book. It wasn't a big thing, but I would have liked to not know it. My favorite thing in this book was Jenny and the dragon Morgelleb and their relationship. I also really like the theme of her hunger for magic and what you are willing to sacrifice in order to get more knowledge and power. And this was written as a standalone, but years later the author wrote maybe a couple of more books set in the same world. I'm not quite sure if I will get around to reading them, but I thought I'd mention they are out there, and I gave this one 3.5 stars. Next, for the readathon for the 70s book, I read The Forgotten Beasts of Eld by Patricia A. McKillip, and this is an owned physical book, and it's lyrical high fantasy. So Sybil is this young woman who has lived alone with her magical creatures in this distant mansion in the mountains for all of her life, but her life changes when the soldier man arrives to her gates with an infant and asks her to take the baby and care for it. So through raising this little boy, Sybil learns a bit about dealing with other people. I didn't mind this young woman learns love through a baby thing, because Sybil wasn't like magically suddenly good at taking care of a baby just because she was a woman. She just didn't really know what to do with it, and she asks for the help of a wise woman that lives down the mountain called Mags, who was actually my favorite character. And I got the feeling that it was Mags who took care of most of the practical elements of actually raising the child. I think Max had like the most common sense of all the characters in this book. So even though I'm all for these powerful magical wizard women living alone in these distant hills, Sybil's living arrangement didn't really seem that healthy. Sybil doesn't really know about anything about the world, anything beyond that house. So Sybil's father had kidnapped her mother and she didn't want to be there. I don't remember, did Sybil ever really know her? But her father wasn't that great. He was this silent figure who was all about magic, and that was what he thought Sybil. And after his death, Sybil was left to live pretty much like he had. So I think she did need to learn a bit about other people and about the world so that she can make some informed decisions. What I really liked about this book, that it took a turn for a revenge plot at some point, and I really eat that up. I really like revenge stories and not letting revenge swallow you, what happens when you give yourself into revenge. So I really enjoyed that part. What I didn't like was the bad romantic interest. It wasn't very healthy, and I would have much rather had Sybil learn about the world through Max and through the villages around the mountain than with a love interest. And that love interest was actually the main deciding factor. I was waiting for the end teetering between 3.5 and 4 stars, and how the love interest was handled, I ended up going with 3.5 stars. And reading The Forgotten Beasts of Eld brings my TBR down to 68 books. The final book that I read for the readathon for the 60s was Witchworld by Andre Norton, which I actually didn't finish during the readathon, but this was an owned ebook, and it's this portal fantasy sword and sorcery adventure. So this book was a completely fine 60s science fiction and fantasy adventure in the tradition of Barsoom, John Carter of Mars sort of thing. So if you like that sort of thing, check this out. But it's really not my thing. I just read this as a curiosity for the readathon, so that I have read something from Andre Norton, tried her out. And this is a portal fantasy where an ex-soldier from our world travels into this fantasy world, joins a battle there between nations. He's on the side of Esthkarp, which is this land ruled by women who have magical powers, and then there's around them some lands that are more misogynistic. What I liked about this book was that the main character doesn't like magically learn the language of the land that he travels to. He has to learn it, even though that part is mostly skipped over, like time passes, he has learned the language. I still like that part. I have to say that this book includes sexual assault and virginity as magic trope. I gave this book 2 stars. It's not my kind of thing. So those were all the books that I finished in April. Then I read 6 comics for Dewey's 24-hour readathon. First, I read the Pingu zine, edited by Zainab Akhtar, which is a digital art zine that I own, which celebrates the claymation Pingu. So it had some illustrations and some mini comics from different creators, and most of them were very cute and fun. My favorites were this stunning scratchboard piece by Nicolas Delors, and a funny cooking tutorial comic by Joe Desi. And then there was also a beautiful comic Traveling Through the Lands of Pingu that was by Luke Person, and Lucy Ebrey had a super cute Pingu illustration. You can get this zine for pay what you want on the publisher's Gumroad, and I will link it below. And I gave this one 4 stars. Next, I read an owned digital fantasy manga, and this I got on sale on Comixology, and it is Witch Hat Atelier Volume 1 by Kamome Shirahama. And this one surprised me because I only picked it up because it was on sale, and I really liked what the art looked like. It had really clean line art, and it turned out to be a very interesting story about this girl who goes to learn magic. So she's learning to be a witch in this very interesting fantasy world that I really want to know more about. I also really like the character design of her teacher, Kithri, and I will definitely continue on with the series. I gave 3.5 stars. Next, I read A Man and His Cat, Volume 1 by Umi Sakurai, which I had borrowed from Reija from the Bookfinch, and this is a contemporary manga about this cat who didn't think he would ever be chosen from the pet store, and this old gentleman who adopts him, and it was very cute. It had these short snippets of their lives together. I don't really have much to say about it. It was cute. I gave it 3 stars. Next, I read a horror science fiction comic, and that one was Southern Cross Volume 1 by Becky Cloonan and Andy Belanger, and I got this from the library. So this is about a woman who lives on a spaceship to look into her sister's death. But on the way, the spaceship encounters all sorts of weird stuff. The plot was this nice cosmic horror murder mystery combo, and I wasn't sure about the art style at first, but it did grow on me somewhat. I think my dream horror science fiction comic would be written by Becky Cloonan with art by Afu Chan from Outer Darkness, like sort of combining the best parts of two science fiction horror comics that I've recently read. So yeah, a gritty murder mystery, cosmic horror, weird science fiction comic. 3 stars. Then I read A Long Distance by Jean Wei, which is an own digital comic, a really short one that I also got from Shortbox's Gumroad, which I will link below. And this is a collection of short comics about some of the gaps that come with growing up as the child of an immigrant family. And it did pretty much what it says on that description. The comics were very short but charming. I gave it 4 stars. And finally, I read Don't Go Without Me by Rosemary Valero O'Connell, and this is an owned SFF comic that I helped kickstart. This consists of 3 short story comics with stunning art, and the comics emphasize feeling and this sort of lingering atmosphere over plot. It's speculative fiction focusing on connections and memories, and it has FF relationships. Valero O'Connell's art is just stunning. I personally really love it, and she just recently won an Eisner Award as Best Penciler or Inker for Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me. I love the art in that comic as well, but the subject matter of this one is much closer to my heart than Laura Dean, also which wasn't written by her. Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me was written by Mariko Tamaki, and these stories are written by Rosemary Valero O'Connell herself. And this one was probably my favorite thing that I read in April. I gave it 4 stars. So now we're moving on to the receipts, and as in March I can say that I did not make any progress in April, so I did not read a book from my 10 books I want to read in 2020 list, nor did I reread a book. I didn't complete any TBR chart challenges, but I did haul some books. So I hauled 2 physical books. I hauled Escaping Exodus by Nikki Drayden, which brings my TBR to 69 books, and The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin, which brings my TBR to 70 books. So we're back at the cursed 70. I also got some ebooks. I talk about all of those in my spring book haul. So now for the stats. In April I read 9 things. I read 1,527 pages. On average I read 51 pages a day and took 3 days for a book. Bear in mind I read 6 comics. Not all of these are actual books, but my current physical TBR number is still 70 books. I cannot get under it, perhaps because I keep buying books, or perhaps because I am not reading my physical TBR at the pace that I did last year. But we'll get through this all somehow. I still have so many reads and receipts left to film. I don't know how I'm gonna do it. I have May, June and July to film. I really want you to be up to date with what I've been reading and what my TBR count is at. So wish me luck, I don't know how I'm gonna do this. But that's all for me for now. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in my next one.